Before we begin, I thought it would be fun if everyone lets me know in the comments where they're watching this video from. And while you're down there, don't forget to subscribe. Now, let's start today's episode. Nearly 1,000 enigmatic strands have been uncovered at the heart of the Milky Way. One of the most fascinating aspects of space exploration is knowing that much of the universe remains beyond our direct observation. Each advancement in telescopes, satellites, or imaging technology brings new discoveries, gradually expanding our understanding of the cosmos. For decades ago, Northwestern University researcher Farhad Yousefzadeh used radio wavelength observations to capture remarkable images of the Milky Way's core. These images revealed peculiar one-dimensional magnetic strands, composed of cosmic ray electrons, stretching as far as 150 light-years. Despite this groundbreaking discovery, little progress has been made in understanding their purpose or origin. Now, a recent image from Sarau's Meerkat telescope has shed new light on this mysterious region. Nearly 1,000 of these strange strands have been revealed in sharp detail, appearing in pairs or clusters and arranged in a regularly stacked formation among surrounding cosmic radio emissions. Scientists working on the project created this striking image by compiling a mosaic of observations taken from 20 different locations, all focused on the galaxy's center. This approach resulted in a panoramic image with the background removed, offering an exceptionally clear view of the strands. With this breakthrough, researchers now have a unique opportunity to investigate these structures in depth. But how do they plan to tackle such a challenging mystery? To begin, the research team is prioritizing the collection of extensive statistical data on these strands. They suspect the filaments may be linked to past activity from the supermassive black hole at the Milky Way's center and aim to identify key variations among the particles while gaining a broader understanding of their properties. Additionally, they seek to analyze the surrounding magnetic fields and cosmic rays, as evidence suggests that many strands likely have different origins. To achieve this, each filament must first be carefully identified and cataloged. Another crucial aspect of this discovery is the ability to monitor the strands over time. With this clear image, researchers can now determine whether these filaments remain unchanged or evolve. While this finding may have raised more questions than answers, it has opened the door to remarkable insights into the mysteries of the Milky Way's core. And with time, even more answers are sure to emerge. If you're fascinated by unsolved mysteries and enjoying the video so far, make sure to hit that subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up to stay updated on all our latest content. Moving on to the next mystery. Native American chiefs served as leaders of their tribes or nations, with their roles varying based on the customs and traditions of each group. However, they generally held several key responsibilities. One of their primary duties was decision-making. Chiefs were tasked with making crucial choices on behalf of their people, including matters of war, hunting locations, and conflict resolution. Another significant role was maintaining peace. Chiefs often worked to foster harmonious relationships with other tribes, negotiating treaties and forming alliances to ensure stability. Preserving culture and traditions was also a vital duty. Chiefs played an essential role in safeguarding their tribe's heritage through storytelling, art, music, and religious ceremonies. Interestingly, many Native American and First Nation tribes spoke of a mysterious creature, one described as a terrifying, monstrous being that no one would ever wish to encounter. The Wendigo is a widely debated creature in North American folklore, sparking division among amateur researchers who struggle to determine whether it has real-world origins or is purely mythical. While some dismiss it as a fabricated legend akin to the jackalope, many firmly believe in its existence. In recent years, hikers have reported encounters with mysterious beings that match the Wendigo's description, leaving them deeply unsettled and convinced that this creature still roams the dense forests, occasionally revealing itself to unsuspecting visitors. Witnesses describe the Wendigo as ranging from human size to over 15 feet tall, with a skeletal frame, gray skin, sunken eyes, large yellow fangs, and an unnervingly long tongue. The legend dates back more than 40,000 years and tells of a monstrous being that could disguise itself as a human, luring people into villages to prey upon them and destroy their homes. Some claim that the Wendigo shares similarities with large bipedal humanoids, though others argue they are entirely separate entities despite occasional sightings in the same regions. As a creature associated with cold climates, the Wendigo has been primarily reported in Canada and the northern United States, particularly in Minnesota. In the early 20th century, locals blamed mysterious disappearances on the Wendigo, fueling widespread fear. While commonly described as a towering figure with a gaunt, bony frame, accounts vary regarding its agility and speed. Some believe it moves with unnatural swiftness, capable of traversing vast distances even in the harshest winters. Others say that the creature has a haggard walk, which implies that it has no speed. Unlike other carnivorous animals that pursue prey to capture and eat them, the Wendigo lures people away from civilization by mimicking human voices and feasts on them once isolated. Most of the sightings of the Wendigo happened between 1800 and 1920. Since then, only a few sightings of the Wendigo have been reported. Whether one believes in the Wendigo sightings or not, this may not be just any other folklore aimed at aimlessly scaring people. This legend has been associated with problems in real life like selfishness, violence, and greed. It's also associated with taboos against bad behavior. Some anthropologists believe that the stories of the Wendigo are associated with stress among the Native Americans due to the dwindling resources and fears of starvation. Considered to be one of the oldest known legends of the dogman creature across North America, the Wendigo is an ancient beast of Native American folklore that seems to be eerily similar to the dogman sightings of the modern day and has legends that connect many of the separate tribes of Native Americans across the continent. For those that are not aware, Native American tribes often had separate cultures, legends, and territories all across the North American continent, and tended not to mix with other tribes if they could avoid it. Oddly enough, legends of the Wendigo seem to be found across nearly every Native American tribe across North America. The Ojibwe tribe refers to the creature as the Wendigo. The Cree language refers to the creature as the Wedico, but many different translations have been recorded across Native American legends all the way as far as the Athabascan people of the Northwest Pacific Coast, which refer to the creature as the Wechuch, all of which describe a creature similar to each other and cannibalistic in nature. The Wendigo is described as being a savage giant, more like an animal than a man, and standing at a height much larger than a normal man could ever become. The creature was the physical embodiment of gluttony and greed, and had a hunger that could never be satiated, going so far as eating its own limbs when food would get scarce. Some descriptions claim that the Wendigo possessed the antlers of a deer and the legs of a wolf, though many descriptions claim that the Wendigo was a malevolent spirit that could possess a person and turn him into an insatiable giant. An Ojibwe teacher would later translate the legends of the Wendigo into English, describing the creature with the following quote: "The Wendigo was gaunt to the point of emaciation, its desiccated skin pulled tightly over its bones. With its bones pushing out against its skin, its complexion the ash gray of death, and its eyes pushed back deep into their sockets. The Wendigo looked like a gaunt skeleton recently disinterred from the grave. What lips it had were tattered. It was unclean and suffering from suppuration of the flesh. The Wendigo gave off a strange and eerie odor of decay and decomposition." End quote. According to the original legends surrounding the Patterson River area of Alaska, it was back during the early 1750s that a native tribe known as the Tlingit named the region surrounding the Patterson River the Bay of Death after a mysterious incident would lead to the eradication of an entire settlement of more than 500 people. Although the event was attributed to a sudden mountain slide that collapsed exactly on the settlement near the bay, many members of the tribe blamed a strange humanoid creature, referred to as the Kushtaka, for the attack, claiming that a team of the monsters had worked to cause the mountain slide that took out more than 500 of their tribesmen. Worried that another attack was soon to occur, the Tlingit moved out of the region and inhabited a nearby piece of land where they would tell stories of their original land and the attacks from the unknown monsters. One of the most prominent figures of Tlingit folklore, the creatures referred to as the Kushtaka, are described by Tlingit tribal members as being a shape-shifting humanoid creature of malevolent intentions. Legends claim that the creature often shifts between assuming the shape of a humanoid creature or an otter and potentially other animal-like forms impossible to describe. In several Kushtaka legends, The creatures are cruel monsters that take pleasure in tricking the tribe's sailors into freezing or falling into the nearby icy Alaskan waters. In many stories of the Kushtaka, the tribe claimed that the creatures will often perform a strange otter-like illusion or shape-shifting trick in order to distract the unsuspecting tribe's sailor or travelers. After a sufficient amount of time, the unsuspecting traveler will suddenly find himself transformed into a fellow Kushtaka, unable to ever return to his friends or family. In the event that this creature is not interested in transforming a tribal member into a shape-shifting creature, it's been known to attack travelers, which then causes them to vanish. In some legends, the creature is known for tricking tribal members into traveling too close to the waters by mimicking the sound of a baby or the screams of a woman. It's also claimed that the creature can be heard by listening out for a high-pitched three-part whistle in the patter of low, high, then low again. Anthropologists have argued that the creature appears to be the cultural equivalent of the boogeyman, often used by mothers in order to warn their children not to journey too close to the surrounding waters or wander too far off alone in the snow. For this reason, it's commonly cited amongst legends that children are especially vulnerable to the Kushtaka, as many disappearances are tied to the creature. By the early 1900s, many American explorers had heard the legends of the bay and were interested in supposed claims that the fresh mountainside was riddled with rich pockets of gold nuggets and rich veins of golden ore. Hoping to strike it rich, a large number of prospectors would make the previous expedition out to the Alaskan wilderness with the hopes of entering into the bay and staking a claim near the mountainside. As is to be expected with such a perilous journey, very few of those that traveled to Alaska in the hopes of suddenly becoming rich would actually survive the journey. According to the vast majority of the stories surrounding the explorers, it said that they were believed to have perished during the Alaskan winter months, either due to the freezing temperatures or insufficient supplies. Only a handful of survivors would make it out of the bay with bizarre stories to match their impossible-to-explain survival rate. According to numerous expeditionists, while journeying through the region, they passed two bodies of water, one later identified as S Lake and another described as having the distinct shape of a crescent moon. As they traversed the area, several survivors recounted being attacked by an unknown, devil-like creature that lurked in the surrounding wilderness. The beings were described as something between a man and a monkey, with footprints that appeared to be a hybrid between a human's and those of a native bear. Each of these creatures was said to stand around 4 feet tall, covered in long, shaggy hair, with large claws extending from their limbs. As they advanced toward the expeditionists, many survivors recalled a putrid, skunk-like stench, which they believed originated from the creatures' bodies, particularly from the numerous visible sores covering their skin. Few expeditionists managed to survive the attack, as the creatures displayed a primitive form of intelligence, coordinating their efforts to isolate and overwhelm individuals away from the main group. Even those who managed to escape later faced another deadly challenge: starvation. Survivors claimed that the area surrounding the bay was eerily devoid of small game or wildlife, leaving them with little chance of survival. Moving on to the next mystery. Astronomers have identified a rare black widow star system in a recent study, shedding light on a unique astronomical phenomenon known as a black widow pulsar. The system, designated J06102100, is located approximately 10,000 light-years from Earth. It was first detected in February 2003 when scientists observed periodic pulses coming from the region. After further analysis, researchers confirmed that the system contained a pulsar, a collapsed, highly magnetized star that spins rapidly while emitting powerful electromagnetic blasts from its poles. So if their pole is facing the Earth, we can see the light in space, but it quickly goes away as the star spins. For example, J06102100 flickers every 3.8 milliseconds as it turns around. The object was named after the black widow spider that famously eats other spiders of a smaller size. The black widow pulsar is made up of 2 stars, one larger and one smaller. The larger of the two is slowly devouring the smaller star by pulling most of the surrounding matter into space. In addition to removing any matter from its vicinity, the largest star hits the smaller star with consistent energy discharges. on J06102100. These pulses have been happening over the last hundred or even thousands of years. These hits of energy push much of the remaining star matter into space. Since the star could devour its smaller counterpart at some point, scientists want to study this system before it goes away. Emma van der Woteren, a doctorate student at the Netherlands Institute for Radio Astronomy, studied the Black Widow pulsar for years and analyzed 16 years of data from a radio telescope to discover more about the pulsar. She and her team found some unique and interesting things about this specific star system. First, this system has never shown any changes in timing. It was consistent and steady throughout the past 16 years. Typically, Black Widow pulsars are irregular and temperamental, which is why this finding is so important to astronomers. Second, the star system does not have a radio eclipse, which is found in most other Black Widow pulsars. A radio eclipse occurs when radio emissions temporarily cease during a specific phase of a star's orbital path. According to van der Woteren, this happens when the companion star moves in front of the pulsar, and the irradiated material it emits blocks the pulsar's radio signals. While the exact mechanics of this eclipse remain a mystery, its predictable timing serves an important scientific purpose. Van der Woteren explains that detecting gravitational waves requires a network of highly stable pulsars. Unlike previously discovered Black Widow pulsars, this system exhibits remarkable stability, making it a valuable candidate for gravitational wave detection. By analyzing the consistent energy pulses from the larger star, scientists hope to identify gravitational waves, rare disturbances in the fabric of spacetime. First theorized by Albert Einstein, gravitational waves emerge when massive cosmic objects collide. These waves travel through spacetime at the speed of light, distorting the universe's structure as they propagate. Moving on to the next mystery. The disappearance of Martin Dickoff remains one of the most baffling missing person cases in recent history. The 44-year-old Dutch man mysteriously vanished without a trace after a brief trip to Belgium, leaving behind only a handful of puzzling clues. Despite extensive investigations by both Dutch and Belgian authorities, no definitive answers have surfaced, keeping his case shrouded in mystery. Martin was a well-respected member of his community, having lived in Alphen on den Rijn for 25 years while successfully running a tiling business. He had no known debts, no apparent enemies, and maintained a strong bond with his family. On January 23, 2014, he set out on a short trip to the Belgian coastal city of Ostend, where he checked into the Andromeda Hotel at 11:15 p.m. After checking in, Martin headed to the Casino Corcel, where surveillance cameras recorded him leaving at 12:30 a.m. He appeared restless, spending more time on his phone than engaging in the games. The next few hours are critical in reconstructing his movements. While security cameras in the area lost track of him, he eventually returned to his hotel. At 4 a.m., his van was seen leaving the underground parking garage. Strangely, Martin never officially checked out. His last confirmed sighting was at 4:52 a.m. at an Esso gas station in Drongen, Belgium, where he filled up his tank and bought a coffee. Security footage showed him alone, behaving normally. After that, he drove away, and his movements became increasingly erratic. Concern escalated when he failed to return home, prompting his family to report him missing on January 25. Upon retracing his steps, investigators discovered that before his final casino visit, he had briefly returned to the Netherlands, stopping at a gas station in Gouda, and later buying coffee at McDonald's. He then inexplicably drove back to Belgium, making it his second trip to the casino that night. This unusual behavior puzzled investigators. Through his vehicle's onboard computer and cell phone data, police were able to reconstruct his final journey. After leaving Ostend, he initially headed toward Rotterdam, stopping in Drongen for coffee. From there, he turned north toward Antwerp before abruptly switching off his phone near Wandelgem at 5:16 in the morning. However, his van was still traceable, seen heading toward the Dutch border near Zelzart before unexpectedly turning back into Belgium. After this, there were no further traces of Martin or his vehicle. It wasn't until February 26 that Belgian police found Martin's black Volkswagen transporter van in a parking lot near a Fastned charging station in Alta, 45 kilometers from Ostend. Oddly, this was a charging station for electric vehicles, Yet Martin's van was not electric. The vehicle had been sitting there since 6 in the morning on January 24th, just minutes after his last confirmed movement. A parking ticket had been placed on the windshield, meaning local authorities had noticed the van, but had no reason to investigate until Martin was reported missing. Inside the van, investigators found no signs of Martin. His wallet, phone, passport, and keys were missing, yet a small suitcase was discovered. Inside were his clothes, neatly folded. The scene presented an eerie sense of organization, as if he had carefully prepared to leave behind his belongings before disappearing. Police reached out to vendors at a nearby weekly market, hoping someone might have seen him, but no one recalled anything unusual. They also searched nearby hotels and questioned other drivers at the charging station, but once again, no new leads emerged. Authorities have since proposed two main theories. The first suggests that Martin took his own life, deliberately ensuring he would never be found. This theory, however, is challenged by the fact that he showed no prior signs of distress, and his trip to the casino seemed spontaneous rather than premeditated. The second theory speculates that he may have been the victim of foul play, potentially related to gambling debts or an encounter on the road. However, there is no evidence of deaths or a violent altercation. As time passes, Martin's disappearance continues to confound investigators and his loved ones. With no conclusive evidence pointing to what truly happened, his fate remains unknown. His case stands as an unsettling mystery, leaving more questions than answers. The mysterious case of Wesley Dale Morgan. The disappearance of Wesley Dale Morgan remains one of the most perplexing and heartbreaking mysteries in Louisiana's history. On May 15, 2001, the 2-year-old vanished from his home in Clinton, Louisiana without a trace. His mother, Ruby Renee Havard, was just 19 at the time, and her boyfriend, 37-year-old Burnell Hilton Jr., also lived in the home. According to Ruby, she left Wesley playing with puppies on the front porch while she went inside to prepare pickled eggs. When she returned just minutes later, her son was gone. That morning would mark the beginning of a decades-long search that has yielded no answers. Authorities immediately launched an extensive search for Wesley, covering a 5-mile radius around the home. Local firemen, corrections officers, neighboring parish officials, and the FBI joined in the search, scouring the dense Louisiana woods for any sign of the missing boy. Despite their best efforts, no evidence surfaced to explain what had happened. There were no footprints, no signs of struggle, and no clues that could lead investigators in a definitive direction. Suspicion quickly fell on Wesley's mother and her boyfriend. Both failed polygraph tests, raising questions about their involvement. Investigators began considering the possibility that Wesley had not simply wandered off, but had instead been taken, possibly by someone close to him. A troubling theory emerged, suggesting that Ruby may have given her son away or even sold him. This theory gained traction when, in February 2008, Ruby was arrested for allegedly trying to sell her unborn child for $2,000. Though the charges were ultimately dropped due to a lack of evidence, it cast a long shadow over her role in Wesley's disappearance. In 2012, retired Baton Rouge police officer Richard K. Sobers took an interest in Wesley's case. Frustrated by the lack of progress, he persuaded the FBI to display age-progressed photos of Wesley on digital billboards throughout Louisiana and Mississippi. He also organized community outreach efforts, distributing flyers, and attempting to hold a vigil in Wesley's honor. However, some members of Wesley's family were resistant to the renewed attention, complicating efforts to keep his case in the public eye. 15 years after Wesley vanished in 2016, the FBI's New Orleans and Baton Rouge divisions launched a rapid deployment team to reinvestigate the case. The reopening of the investigation brought renewed hope, but also painful memories for Ruby, according to her attorney, Rhonda Covington. The fact that this special team is here gives her hope, although it also brings up a lot of memories. A dedicated tip line was established, and the FBI announced a $10,000 reward for any information leading to Wesley's whereabouts. Age-progressed images of him at ages 12 and 15 were widely distributed, but no significant leads materialized. Despite these efforts, Wesley's case remains unsolved, and his fate remains a haunting mystery. His aunt, Mary Dufour, has spoken about the lasting impact of his disappearance on the family, particularly on his father, Dewey Morgan, who shared custody of Wesley at the time. Dewey has since remarried and had other children, but the pain of losing Wesley has never faded. Sheriff Travis stated that the main challenge in the case is the uncertainty surrounding Wesley's fate, whether he is alive or not. The lack of closure has left everyone involved in limbo. Meanwhile, Ruby has built a new life in Louisiana with her husband and 2 daughters. She continues to maintain her innocence and holds on a hope that she will one day reunite with Wesley. Although tensions persist among different sides of the family, they all share the same goal: uncovering the truth about Wesley's disappearance and bringing him home. Despite the passage of time, the case remains open, and the FBI is still offering a $10,000 reward for any information. His disappearance remains an unsolved mystery, leaving a family desperate for answers and a community longing for long overdue closure. Moving on to the next mystery. At around 7:15 a.m., Rebecca's sister left for work, assuming Rebecca was still asleep on the couch. However, when her family later tried to contact her, she was unresponsive. Concern quickly grew when she failed to show up at school. Calls to her phone went straight to voicemail, and her social media activity abruptly stopped. The investigation revealed that Rebecca never boarded her usual bus to school, and no witnesses reported seeing her leave the house. Police initially treated her case as a missing person investigation, but soon suspected foul play due to inconsistencies in her brother-in-law's statements. Forensic evidence reportedly linked him to Rebecca's disappearance, yet no conclusive proof of what happened to her was found. Despite extensive searches, including the use of tracking dogs and large-scale search operations in forests and lakes around Berlin, no trace of Rebecca has ever been found. Her case remains open, fueling ongoing speculation and debate over what truly happened to her that morning. At 7 in the morning, Rebecca's sister left for work with her daughter, leaving only Rebecca and her brother-in-law in the house. Shortly after, at 7:15 in the morning, Rebecca's mother attempted to call her, but was sent straight to voicemail. Digital analysis of Rebecca's phone later revealed that it last connected to the home Wi-Fi at 7:46 a.m. At 8:25 a.m., her mother tried to call her again, but once more reached voicemail. At some point between 7 and 7:46 in the morning, Rebecca sent a Snapchat message to a friend. Since Snapchat messages disappear after they are viewed, the exact time of the photo is unknown. Her friend opened the message at 8:15 in the morning and later described it as showing Rebecca standing in a hallway dressed in a hoodie, along with a pink plush jacket, ripped jeans, and black and white trainers. This was the last confirmed contact from Rebecca. When Rebecca failed to arrive at school by 9:40 and did not return home that afternoon, her family reported her missing. Several of her belongings also disappeared, including the clothes she was seen wearing in the Snapchat message, her Vans backpack, pink handbag, purse, and her mobile phone. Additionally, a purple blanket from her sister's home was missing, which would later become a point of interest in the investigation. The police investigation soon focused on Rebecca's brother-in-law. Authorities found it significant that Rebecca's phone last connected to Wi-Fi while only he was in the house. Despite initially claiming to have been asleep that morning, digital forensic evidence showed that he had been awake and searching for pornographic material related to bondage and strangulation. Another crucial piece of evidence was the use of his raspberry red Renault Twingo on the morning of February 18th. According to traffic cameras and mobile data, the car was driven on the A12 motorway between Berlin and Poland at around 10:47 in the morning, well after Rebecca had disappeared. The car made a second trip on the same highway later that evening. Police have never been able to establish a legitimate reason for these journeys. In addition, a witness reported seeing a similar vehicle parked in a wooded area near Kummersdorf on the same day. 2 horseback riders also described seeing a man acting suspiciously in the same location around midday. Authorities conducted a search of the area, but no significant evidence was recovered. In 2020, German authorities submitted a request to Google for stored data related to Rebecca and her brother-in-law. The information was delivered in early 2021, but the details have not been disclosed to the public. In April 2023, police conducted another search of the suspect's home, performing acoustic tests and looking for objects that could be linked to strangulation. However, no arrests or new breakthroughs followed. Rebecca's case remains a chilling reminder of how a person can seemingly vanish without a trace, even in a world filled with surveillance and digital footprints. Despite law enforcement's suspicions and the public's theories, the lack of physical evidence has kept the case at a standstill. Her family's determination to find her has not wavered, and they continue to push for answers. Online communities and amateur detectives have analyzed every detail, yet no definitive breakthrough has surfaced. Until concrete evidence emerges, the mystery of Rebecca Royce will remain one of Germany's most unsettling disappearances, leaving lingering questions about what truly happened that morning. Moving on to the next mystery. In 2007, Andrew lived in Doncaster with his parents and sister. On the morning of September 14th, he got ready for school but chose not to attend. Instead, he waited in a nearby park until his parents had left for work. He then returned home, changed out of his school uniform, put it in the washing machine, and took his PSP with him, leaving the charger behind. Although there was £100 in his room, Andrew did not take it. Instead, he withdrew £200 from his bank account and headed to Doncaster railway station, where he purchased a one-way ticket to London. He then boarded the 9:35 a.m. train to King's Cross. Witnesses saw him traveling alone. The ticket seller remembered Andrew because he declined a return ticket, even though it was only 50p more. Passengers on the train later described him as quiet and recalled that he spent the journey playing on his PSP. He would be captured on CCTV at approximately 11:20 a.m. CCTV imagery of Gosden at King's Cross was not checked until 27 days after his disappearance, by which time the trail had gone cold. CCTV images showed Andrew leaving King's Cross station on the day that he vanished. That was the last confirmed sighting of him. 1 year after Andrew's disappearance, an unidentified man spoke into the intercom at the doorway to Leominster Police Station, claiming to have information about the case. When an officer arrived to answer the door, however, the man had disappeared. There were fears that Andrew may have been groomed by someone that he met online. This was investigated, but searches of his sister's laptop, which he occasionally used, and the school computers found nothing. His parents held the belief that he did not have any social media or email accounts that they were aware of. He also did not own a mobile phone. Some speculated that Andrew traveled to the capital with the intention of ending his own life. While his family was skeptical of this theory, they did not dismiss it entirely. They even hired a company to scan the Thames with sonar equipment. Although a body was discovered, it was not Andrew. Another possibility was that he had run away to start a new life. Reports suggested that Andrew's favorite TV show featured a character who abandoned their past and assumed a new identity. His parents have continued depositing money into his bank account in case he ever needs it, but it has remained untouched since the day he vanished. More than a decade later, there is still no sign of Andrew Gosden, nor any explanation for his mysterious journey. Moving on to the next mystery. Betsy Ruth Aertsmer was born on July 11, 1947, in Holland, Michigan, and was only 22 years old when her life was tragically cut short. The youngest of 4 siblings, she initially pursued studies in English and art at the University of Michigan before transferring to Pennsylvania State University after graduation. Her long-term boyfriend, David Wright, was a medical student at the same university. Years later, David would often reflect on the loss of Betsy, wondering how things might have been different had she stayed with him that weekend, the weekend she was murdered. David had plans to marry Betsy. On November 28, 1969, she was in the library working on a research paper when fellow students found her collapsed on the floor. Initially, bystanders assumed she had fainted or suffered a seizure and immediately began performing CPR. The campus hospital was notified, and by 5:19 p.m., an ambulance transported her to the Ridenour Health Center, where she was soon pronounced dead. It wasn't until doctors examined her body that they made a chilling discovery. Betsy had been stabbed once through the left breast. Betsy was wearing a red dress that concealed her blood, and she had bled into her lungs, leaving little blood around the wound. Investigators later concluded that she had probably been stabbed from behind, as there were no defensive injuries on her hands or arms. They theorized that Betsy was likely familiar with her killer and did not fear him. Reportedly, just minutes after the stabbing, 1 or 2 men left the library and told the clerk, "Somebody better help that girl." One witness claimed there was only one blonde man. It's unknown whether it was one or two men, and in either case he or they remain unidentified. On the back of the murder, police began their investigation and held 5,000 interviews in the course of it. They made no arrests and pinned down few suspects. Nobody seemed to have a bad word to say about Betsy, and she was described as smart and good-natured and had no known enemies. Whilst David Wright, her boyfriend, was considered a person of interest initially, he was quickly ruled out when their good relationship was vouched for by those who knew the couple. And according to friends, he didn't leave the study group he was in on the day of the murder, providing him with a rock-solid alibi. Witnesses were few and far between in Betsy's case. Some reported hearing a scream, while others told of the sound of falling books or shelves, likely from when the student collapsed among the stacks in the library. Consequently, 3 drawings were released of witnesses that police couldn't track down. But unfortunately, these illustrations were highly generic, and it appears that the witnesses were never found. The murder weapon was also never recovered, leaving investigators with little to go on. To make matters worse, the murder scene had actually been cleaned up by a janitor after Betsy was taken to hospital, leaving police with even less to work with as any crime scene clues were now gone. Despite the lack of leads or information, police did eventually find several suspects. An early suspect in the case was a man named Robert Durgee, a 27-year-old English professor who died in a car crash in Michigan about 3 weeks after the murder. He was investigated and cleared, although it's unknown what drew him into the eye of the police as a person of interest in the first place. It was also briefly speculated that the infamous Ted Bundy was responsible for the killing, as he'd attended Temple University in Pennsylvania in 1969 and was a frequent visitor of university libraries. However, he was also ruled out. Another fleeting suspect was some kind of military man, given the precision of the wound. It was later theorized that perhaps Betsy had stumbled upon a gay couple or encounter and was killed so that she wouldn't tell of anything she'd witnessed. This was thought because when a black light was used on the area where she was found, it revealed human bodily fluids. But the stacks were notorious for couples doing drugs and having sex, so it couldn't really be determined that Betsy had seen anything. The biggest suspect in the case was a man named Richard Hefner, sometimes referred to as Rick. Just hours after the murder, before the news broke, Hefner went to the home of his Penn State professor and asked if they had heard the news about Betsy. It seems that Richard had dated the 22-year-old woman for a brief time, and Hefner told police that their relationship came to an end in October of 1969, despite the fact that at the time, Betsy had been dating David Wright, and they'd been discussing marriage. Hefner told authorities that he didn't know of the murder until the day after it had occurred, contradicting the account that he'd gone to his professor's home to tell of the news of her death. Despite the suspicious circumstances around Hefner, he was never investigated any further. Worryingly, those who knew him referred to him as a sociopath. He reportedly once drove 800 miles to proclaim his love to a woman he barely knew on her doorstep. He also once punctured a neighbor's tire with a knife and threw dog waste through another neighbor's car window. 6 years later, in 1975, Hefner was arrested for molesting a 13-year-old boy, but the trial resulted in a hung jury. After this, he had frequent run-ins with the law. In 1992, Hefner faced accusations of inappropriate behavior with a child. Then, in 1998, he was charged with assaulting a woman in a parking lot, an attack that left the victim with a dislocated jaw and several loosened teeth. Many crime enthusiasts and online investigators suspect that Hefner was responsible for the murder of his former girlfriend. However, the apparent shift in his violent behavior, from harming women to targeting young boys, remains a perplexing and unsettling detail. According to Hefner's nephew, he once overheard his mother yelling, "You killed that girl, and now you're killing me." Betsy's own nephew is convinced that Hefner was responsible for her murder, but the truth remains elusive. Hefner passed away in 2002, leaving lingering doubts about whether he was truly behind the crime. To this day, Betsy's family has never seen justice, and her former boyfriend, David Wright, still wonders what could have been. More than 50 years later, Betsy's case remains unsolved. Moving on to the next mystery. Bryce Rhodes, a 25-year-old man, displayed shocking cruelty and showed no remorse for his actions. He stands accused of murdering 2 brothers, 14-year-old Larry Ordway and 16-year-old Maurice Gordon, whose bodies were discovered following a distressing 911 call. Their mother, Elizabeth Runn, was devastated upon receiving the heartbreaking news. Her grief was compounded by the horrifying nature of their deaths. Both boys were repeatedly stabbed in the chest before their bodies were set on fire. The sheer brutality of the crime left many unanswered questions, particularly regarding Bryce Rhodes' motive. According to him, the boys had uncovered a secret that could have jeopardized his life. Although this secret was never fully disclosed to the public, it appears to have been the catalyst for the horrific act. The fear of exposure or the potential loss of his freedom may have driven him to commit such a monstrous crime. The senseless loss of 2 young lives in such a violent manner only deepens the chilling nature of the case, leaving many to wonder whether the secret he sought to protect was truly worth the cost. The curiosity of a 22-year-old woman led her to a chilling discovery. While exploring an abandoned building on River Park Drive, she noticed evidence of a recent fire. The structure, which had seemed intact just a day earlier, was now charred and damaged, indicating that something violent had taken place. Her decision to investigate further would later prove to be a crucial turning point in an unfolding and horrifying case. As the investigation continued, it became evident that the fire was tied to a much larger and more terrifying series of events. Authorities soon determined that the blaze had been intentionally set and was directly connected to the brutal murders of Larry Ordway and Maurice Gordon. Their bodies had been burned beyond recognition, with the fire serving as a gruesome attempt to conceal the crime. This connection became a key piece of evidence for law enforcement as they worked to uncover the horrifying circumstances surrounding the boys' tragic deaths. The fact that this discovery was made by an ordinary individual, simply out of curiosity, turned out to be a crucial development in the investigation. It highlighted the potential for the smallest details to help unravel a horrifying mystery. Amidst the mess of the burned building, she spotted something strange, a shape that seemed out of place. As she went closer, her heart pounded with fear as she discovered it was a dead body. But the surprises didn't end there. Not far away, she had found another body, and both of them were badly burned. Feeling extremely scared, she quickly called the police for help. The area quickly became flooded with police officers working to unravel the strange events that had occurred there the previous night. The crime scene was so horrific that the police described it as the worst they had ever encountered. One officer, visibly shaken, had to pause, unable to contain his emotions as he covered the 2 lifeless bodies with a white cloth. The bodies were quickly transported to the hospital for an autopsy by pathologists. In the meantime, the remaining officers continued to search the scene meticulously for any potential clues to aid in the investigation. After the autopsies, it was revealed that the cause of death wasn't the fire, but something even more sinister. According to a document released from the coroner's office, both boys had suffered severe head injuries from blunt force trauma, as well as stab wounds to their chests. What's even more chilling is that they had already died hours before their bodies were set on fire and left at the scene. Now, to begin their murder investigation and gather clues, the police needed to figure out who the boys were and why someone would harm them in such a terrible manner. Despite the bodies being badly burned, the police had a stroke of luck as they managed to create sketches of the boys. The sketches were released to the public, accompanied by a plea for anyone who might recognize them to come forward and assist in their identification. However, the authorities didn't rely solely on the sketches. They also scoured missing persons reports from the days leading up to the discovery, hoping to find matches for the victims' descriptions. Unfortunately, their efforts led to no answers. As the days passed, and Monday arrived and departed, no one came forward to identify the 2 boys. The following day, on May 23, 2016, a worried woman named Elizabeth Wren rushed to the police station. She was visibly anxious as she told the officers the sketches they had released were of her sons, 14-year-old Larry Ordway and 16-year-old Maurice Gordon. Elizabeth was shocked when the officers delivered the heartbreaking news that her sons' bodies had been found completely burned. The police told her that they were suspecting foul play and believed it wasn't just an accident, but rather a carefully planned murder. Elizabeth desperately wanted to see her sons one last time, but the officers had to gently refuse her request. The condition of the bodies was so horrific that no mother should have to witness such a sight. Despite her overwhelming sense of helplessness, Elizabeth found the strength to provide the police with a crucial piece of information. She recalled that on the evening of May 21st, 2016, her sons had told her they were going out with friends she had always disapproved of. Though she had previously tried to keep them away from these individuals, they still chose to go. That night, they left for a party accompanied by 3 people. Among them were 17-year-old Jackery Taylor, 15-year-old Antoine Carter, and 25-year-old Bryce Rhodes. Elizabeth had deep concerns about Bryce, given his troubling criminal background, which included serious offenses such as domestic violence, physical assaults, kidnapping, and abuse. Her sons reassured her they would be back soon. When days passed without any word from them, she wasn't immediately alarmed. Her boys had a habit of partying and occasionally staying out for extended periods. However, she had no way of knowing that this time would be different. The devastating news that followed would shatter her world forever. The police wasted no time in tracking down the entire group. They quickly found Antoine Carter and brought him in for questioning. Meanwhile, they continued their search for Bryce, and by the next day, Tuesday, May 24th, 2016, they had located him as well. Another member of the group, Jackery Taylor, was also apprehended on the same day, all within a short span of time. Bryce and Jackery spent hours in police custody as each were speaking separately with detectives about Larry and Maurice. The detectives tried to make Jackery nervous by showing him crime scene photos of the 2 brothers, hoping to coax information about the murders. However, all Jackery said was that he was friends with the brothers but had nothing to do with their deaths. On the other hand, Bryce insisted to police that he had no idea where the brothers were and eventually requested a lawyer. When Jackery and Bryce didn't provide any useful information, the police decided to change their approach. During separate interviews with Anwin, they noticed a difference in his demeanor. That's when Anwin finally opened up about what exactly happened on the evening of May 21st. He explained that Bryce had called him and Jackery to his apartment that evening. There, Bryce confided in them and expressed his suspicion that Larry and Maurice might tell the police about something they had seen on May 4th, 2016, which was Bryce's biggest secret. Bryce managed to persuade Jackery and Anwin to assist him with a plan that involved something terrible, killing the brothers. On the night of May 21st, Jackery went to their house and convinced the brothers to come out by telling them that Bryce was going to take them to a party. Larry and Maurice were a bit unsure at first, but eventually they agreed to go along. As they had left the house, they assured their mother Elizabeth that they would be back later that night. The group had driven to Bryce's house, which he shared with his mother, who happened to be out of town that weekend. As the boys settled in, they began hanging out and having a good time, just like any other party. But Larry and Maurice had no idea that there was something sinister brewing behind the scenes. Suddenly, out of nowhere, an argument broke out among the group and ruined the fun atmosphere of the party. Antoine told the police that Jackery accused the brothers that they had stolen money from Bryce. When Jackery confronted Maurice about the theft, he became furious. At that moment, Maurice felt threatened and could sense the danger, so he grabbed a knife to save him and his brother, which escalated the whole situation. Anwin stated that when Maurice pulled out the knife, Bryce quickly stepped in and took it away. Then they both managed to overpower the brothers and tied them up with belts. They separated Larry from Maurice so that both brothers wouldn't be able to fight back and left him in the bathroom, while Bryce brought Maurice to his knees in the living room. Maurice pleaded for their lives, but Bryce demanded that he beg for forgiveness. It was a tense moment as Jackery and Anwin watched Maurice tearfully beg for forgiveness, hoping to save himself and his brother from whatever was about to happen next. Bryce's cruelty knew no bounds. The police wasted no time in tracking down the entire group. They quickly found Antoine Carter and brought him in for questioning. Meanwhile, they continued their search for Bryce, and by the next day, Tuesday, May 24th, 2016, they had located him as well. Another member of the group, Jackery Taylor, was also apprehended on the same day, all within a short span of time. Bryce and Jackery spent hours in police custody as each were speaking separately with detectives about Larry and Maurice. The detectives tried to make Jackery nervous by showing him crime scene photos of the 2 brothers, hoping to coax information about the murders. However, all Jackery said was that he was friends with the brothers but had nothing to do with their deaths. On the other hand, Bryce insisted to police that he had no idea where the brothers were and eventually requested a lawyer. When Zachary and Bryce didn't provide any useful information, the police decided to change their approach. During separate interviews with Anwin, they noticed a difference in his demeanor. That's when Anwin finally opened up about what exactly happened on the evening of May 21st. He explained that Bryce had called him and Zachary to his apartment that evening. There, Bryce confided in them and expressed his suspicion that Larry and Maurice might tell the police about something they had seen on May 4th, 2016, which was Bryce's biggest secret. Bryce managed to persuade Zachary and Anwin to assist him with a plan that involved something terrible, killing the brothers. On the night of May 21st, Zachary went to their house and convinced the brothers to come out by telling them that Bryce was going to take them to a party. Larry and Maurice were a bit unsure at first, but eventually they agreed to go along. As they had left the house, they assured their mother Elizabeth that they would be back later that night. The group had driven to Bryce's house, which he shared with his mother, who happened to be out of town that weekend. As the boys settled in, they began hanging out and having a good time, just like any other party. But Larry and Maurice had no idea that there was something sinister brewing behind the scenes. Suddenly, out of nowhere, an argument broke out among the group and ruined the fun atmosphere of the party. Anjuan told the police that Zachary accused the brothers that they had stolen money from Bryce. When Zachary confronted Maurice about the theft, he became furious. At that moment, Maurice felt threatened and could sense the danger, so he grabbed a knife to save him and his brother, which escalated the whole situation. Anwin stated that when Maurice pulled out the knife, Bryce quickly stepped in and took it away. Then they both managed to overpower the brothers and tied them up with belts. They separated Larry from Maurice so that both brothers wouldn't be able to fight back and left him in the bathroom, while Bryce brought Maurice to his knees in the living room. Maurice pleaded for their lives, but Bryce demanded that he beg for forgiveness. It was a tense moment as Zachary and Anwin watched Maurice tearfully beg for forgiveness, hoping to save himself and his brother from whatever was about to happen next. Bryce's cruelty knew no bounds. After laying a blanket on the floor under Maurice, he had covered his head with stockings and shoved a rag into his mouth. Then, in a shocking act of violence, Bryce began mercilessly beating Maurice and stabbing him over and over again in the chest. The other teens watching were terrified and shaken by the gruesome and horrific scene unfolding before them. Bryce, with his menacing demeanor, threatened the boys who were witnessing the horror and pressured Anjuan into stabbing Maurice once in the chest. Fearing Bryce's wrath, Anjuan reluctantly obeyed his command and stabbed Maurice. Anjuan continued his chilling account and revealed that once Maurice was dead, Bryce forcefully brought Larry out of the bathroom to the living room where his brother's blood was covering the floor. It was a heartbreaking moment for Larry as he realized his brother was now dead. Morris's lifeless body was moved aside as Bryce turned his attention to Larry, and one vividly remembered Larry's painful voice when he pleaded with Bryce to spare him, but it was all in vain. Larry was subjected to the same horrific treatment as his brother. Anwin still heard Larry's desperate pleas before Bryce had stabbed him a shocking 20 times in the chest. Once again, Bryce threatened Zachary and forced him to stab Larry once. With both Maurice and Larry now dead, Bryce loaded their bodies into the car and called another friend to help dispose of them. As Bryce and his friend drove off with the brothers' lifeless bodies in the back seat, Anjuan and Zachary were left behind at the apartment as Bryce instructed them to clean up the gruesome scene. Anjuan continued his confession by revealing that Bryce drove their lifeless bodies to an abandoned lot and set them on fire. As the flames engulfed Maurice and Larry, their bodies burned that fateful night. However, by some stroke of luck, their bodies hadn't turned to ashes. After Anwin's interrogation, the police finally uncovered the horrifying truth about how Larry and Maurice met their tragic end. However, there were still lingering questions in their minds. What was the brothers' connection to Bryce? And what was the secret that led to such a dreadful fate for the siblings? Larry and Maurice were just regular teenagers who enjoyed life, and even though they were stepbrothers, they shared a strong bond. But things took a turn when they met Bryce in 2015, and his cool personality caught their attention right away. Bryce was a rapper, and he had a bunch of music videos online that made him seem super successful and rich. Larry and Maurice were impressed by his lifestyle and charisma, and soon found themselves drawn into his world. As their bond grew stronger, Bryce introduced the boys to one of his acquaintances, 17-year-old Zachary Taylor. Over time, as the three boys spent more time with Bryce, they met a fourth teenager, 14-year-old Anwyn Carter, who joined their group in 2015. They frequently spent time together, with Bryce driving them around, buying them clothes and food, and even giving them money to spend freely. In a police interview, Zachary revealed that Bryce often promised them fame if they followed in his footsteps. Gradually, the boys began to embrace Bryce's gangster lifestyle. Their increasing association with Bryce became evident in their actions. They even appeared in some of his music videos, portraying an image that suggested they were adopting his mindset. Elizabeth noticed a shift in their behavior during this period. Their social media accounts became flooded with images of them posing with fake weapons, flaunting stacks of cash, smoking cigars, and posing with women. They also started attending parties more frequently, sometimes staying out for days at a time. On May 4, 2016, they were returning from one such party late at night, around 12:30 a.m. Maurice was driving Bryce's car with Zachary in the passenger seat and Bryce and Larry in the back, while Anwyn was following behind them in a truck. Suddenly, brakes of his car when he spotted a man walking on the sidewalk of the 800 block of South 41st Street in Louisville, Kentucky. As he strained to remember where he knew him from, it soon clicked that he was Christopher Jones, the 40-year-old man that local gangs were after. But Bryce made a serious mistake. He wrongly identified Christopher, thinking he was someone else trying to collect the reward placed on his head. It was such a mistake that it changed everything in an instant. In a moment of panic, Bryce quickly pulled out his gun and shot Christopher in the chest from the car window. As Christopher fell down, all the teens were stunned by witnessing a murder in front of their eyes. Without even stopping to think, they drove away from there as fast as they could, feeling scared and full of adrenaline. After the shooting, Christopher was rushed to emergency surgery, but sadly, he didn't make it and died during the operation. Bryce had driven the boys home and warned them not to breathe a word about what happened that night. But over the next 2 weeks, Larry and Maurice couldn't shake off the horror of what they had seen. They started avoiding Bryce more and more as they felt uneasy about being around him. Meanwhile, Bryce was feeling anxious too. He worried that the brothers might spill the beans about the shooting to everyone, and he would be in serious trouble. So he made a decision to end their lives on the evening of May 21, 2016. In a short period, Bryce made a grave decision to take the lives of 3 people, all to protect himself. But now the consequences of his actions are closing in on him. Following the interrogations, both Zachary and Anwyn admitted guilt to 3 counts of aiding in murder and tampering with evidence. Because they were under 18 years old, they were sentenced to serve 10 years in juvenile detention centers, with the remainder to be served in adult prisons once they turned 18. As part of their agreements, they were also required to testify against Bryce during his trial. Ever since Bryce was arrested, he made a mess of the court hearings. The victims' families thought he did it on purpose. They believed he was trying to cause chaos because he knew the prosecution wanted the death penalty. He thought if he made enough trouble and delayed the process, they might not give him the death penalty. At first, Bryce did something shocking. He spit on his court-appointed attorney because he found out the attorney was friends with the victim's grandfather. This caused a big problem, and the attorney had to leave the case due to a conflict of interest. Later, there was even a fight between Bryce and the attorney. Bryce even made a threatening statement. "I'll see you when I get out." Because of this threat, in future courtroom appearances, Bryce was restrained to his chair and made to wear a spit mask. But even with these measures, his behavior didn't improve. In one hearing, he even threatened the judge and her family. Bryce's antics in the courtroom didn't stop there. Many times he refused to let his attorney speak for him and claimed that he didn't trust them. He even went through 3 different state-appointed attorneys because of this. It was like he was determined to do things his own way no matter what anyone else had said. After this courtroom appearance in 2017, Bryce also tried to escape from prison by digging a hole in his cell. However, officers found the hole and also uncovered a threatening note he sent to Zachary. The note read, "Rats get exposed. Show me that you're not a rat." This showed Bryce's determination to manipulate even from behind bars. In another shocking incident captured on court video, Bryce displayed shameless behavior as he was seen in the video blowing kisses at the mother of the victims. It was a disturbing display of his lack of remorse or guilt for his action. The trial kept getting postponed over and over again, and Elizabeth was becoming increasingly frustrated, not only with the delays, but also with Bryce's attitude in the courtroom. During one hearing, her emotions overwhelmed her, and she had to be removed from the courtroom. Later, when talking to journalists, she revealed that despite trying to find forgiveness through her faith, she couldn't shake the pain of losing her two boys to this monster. She described Bryce as sick and a demon, which highlighted the depth of her anguish and anger towards him. After 6 long years of Bryce's senseless behavior and intense courtroom drama, justice was finally served in 2022. Bryce Rhodes was convicted of stabbing and burning the bodies of teenage brothers, murder charges. Along with the 3 murder charges, the jury also found Bryce guilty of tampering with physical evidence and 2 counts of abuse of a corpse. For the murders, the jury recommended a life sentence without parole. Additionally, the court recommended a 5-year sentence for tampering with evidence and 1 year for each count of corpse abuse. Although Bryce was not eligible for the death penalty, his sentences will run concurrently, ensuring that he will spend the rest of his life behind bars unless his defense successfully appeals the ruling. Following the verdict, the teen brothers' grandmother, Deborah Wren, became emotional as she shared heartfelt memories of them. During the trial, the jury had to consider Bryce Rhodes' mental state when determining his punishment. The defense argued that he had an intellectual disability and cited his diagnoses of ADHD and bipolar disorder, emphasizing that he had lacked the necessary support and education to manage these conditions. However, despite these claims, the jury ultimately ruled in favor of the prosecution and the victims. What are your thoughts on this case? Do you believe the absence of positive adult role models made the teenage boys more susceptible to manipulation? What measures can be taken to protect vulnerable youth from being drawn into violence and exploitation in the future? Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed exploring these intriguing unsolved mysteries with me. If you found the video fascinating, don't forget to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to Unsolved Mystique for more deep dives into unsolved mysteries. Your support helps me bring you more compelling content. Leave a comment below with your thoughts or any mysteries you'd like me to cover next. See you in the next video.